we'll go from there.
Well, welcome everybody. We are so delighted to have you on the call. Michael and I have actually used life-size technology, so this is really our first Zoom experience. So we do appreciate your patience as we figure out the technology. But we do thank you for your time and being here. We are HBK High Performance. We are a coaching company. We focus on culture and leadership, training and coaching in those two realms. And we are a coaching company inside of a financial services firm. So we just wanted to invite you personally on this call and thank you for your time. What we wanted to cover this afternoon, Michael's going to be talking about successfully leading through crisis, and he's going to give us 3 V words. And after he's done with his presentation, we are going to have some discussion time. So if you're not familiar with some of the features of a Zoom chat, you can chat to people that are actually on the call. You can instant message them privately. You can also send a message to me or Michael if you just want to send a question so that we can see that. We encourage you to dialogue. You're a big part of this call. We'd love to hear what your experience is, what your questions are, so that Michael can answer them. We also want to invite you to follow us on social media. If you're not familiar with HBK High Performance, we are on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn under HBK High Performance. Our website is hbkln.com, LN for Leadership Network. I'm going to introduce Michael so we can get him right on. He asked me to share a story about his time in Guam, where he literally jumped off a cliff into the waters, almost dashing his head on the coral reef below. He has survived to tell us about that incident. So we do like to have a little fun at High Performance, and you know, a cheerful heart's good medicine. Laughter's good for the soul, and I think we need a little bit of joy in this time of crisis. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Michael. And before I do that, I just want to acknowledge the HBK High Performance team. My name's Julene Kiefer. I'm a business coach. Michael Ross is our principal and founder. And Rhonda Tagenhorst is our administrative assistant. And we are here to serve you. We hope you have a great call. We hope you find value in this. That's our mission, is that you live a fulfilled and impactful life. So I'm going to turn it over to our peril-loving Guam diving expert over there, Mr. Michael B. Ross.
Thanks, Julene. Love having everybody here. I just want to take a moment and just say out of gratitude how awesome it is to live in a day and age where we aren't physically together, but we can be together via technology. You know, I know a lot is said about technology and how it keeps us disconnected at times, but this is really telling of how much technology is benefiting our culture. So I'd like to start with gratitude and say it is so good to connect with all of you, even though we can't be together, and for good reason. But it's awesome to be able to see you all and connect with you all, and I hope you feel the same way. As again, we work through the technology, you know, I ask you to give us some grace, want to make sure that you're going to have a great experience here, and we are recording the call. So you're going to see this after we're done, and you can share it with people. All right, so one thing I want to do real quick is I want to get it on the speaker view, and then we'll get started with some of the presentation. I am going to ask you this. During the presentation, I'm going to ask you to share some things in the chat. So when I ask a few questions, I'd ask you to type and share in the chat if you have access to doing that. After about 35 minutes of us going back and forth with the presentation and some of the information I'm going to share with you, then I am going to open it up for Q&A. I do believe this wholeheartedly as a coach, and I've seen it experientially, and it is backed by science, that the greatest time we can have together is a time where we're interacting. So I would ask you to think of some questions that might pop up during the presentation, and then in the chat itself, you can share your questions with me personally. At the end of my presentation, what I will then do is read off the questions and try to answer them as best as possible. There's also a feature that you can raise your hand. There are quite a few participants here today, so I don't know how many hands we'll be able to get to, but let's get to as many as possible. And if you do have a question you want to ask that we don't get to today, I would ask you to email me, and my email is this, mross@hbkln.com, and I will get to your questions and respond to you during this time so that you get the most value out of this time. Okay, so I'm going to bring up, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to bring up the PowerPoint that we're going to be going over today. And so if you can't see it, don't worry. I'm going to share what is on the PowerPoint as well. And it's a lot of pictures and a lot of one-word slides, so no worries. First thing I'd like to do is I'd like to talk to you about the crisis that we're actually in. And what a crisis is it is a time of uncertainty. So right now we are in a time of great uncertainty, both in our culture, socially, and also in our business. We have uncertainty in when the government is going to lift regulations. We have uncertainty of when our kids are going to go back to school. We have uncertainty of the financial implications. We have uncertainty about when we can continue client work in the same way. We have uncertainty about what life is going to be like a month from now. And most of the time, business owners, they look at their business from a year back standpoint. And now we're forced to look at things a little bit differently. And that's okay. You know, what I have been told, what I have studied for 18 years in leadership is that true leadership emerges in crisis. True leaders emerge in crisis. So what I want to encourage everybody on today is that this is the time for you to emerge. But what I don't want to do is be haphazard and talk all these hyperbolic or highfalutin ideas without facing reality. It is important that we live in reality. And what I always coach on when I coach leaders or coach executives, what I like to tell them is this: let's not fight reality, let's work with reality. We don't have to look and focus on the crisis. Things are a challenge right now. They are difficult. There are terrible things happening. We don't have to focus on that. What we can do is recognize it and look at the opportunity. So what I want to do quickly is in this slide, I want to bring this slide up. And what I'd like you to do in the chat is when you look at this, okay, as honest as you can be with a group of maybe 50 strangers here, I want you to write down a couple of feelings or thoughts that are coming to mind when you see this word right here, right now. What are a few feelings, thoughts, words that are coming to mind? And just type this in the chat. You're in a safe environment here. Just go ahead and type that. Yeah, unknown, cautious, fear of the unknown, negativity, death, potential harm, mortality. It's scary. It's absolutely. Thank you, Rich, for sharing that. Gloomy. Yeah, community. What's going to happen with our community? Panic. Absolutely. Keep sharing, please. Helplessness. Absolutely. Helplessness. That's a valid fear. Yeah, Raylan Jones said it's not to take things for granted. Worried about loved ones, absolutely. Sickness, thank you, Nikki. Yes. Things are rapidly changing, absolutely rapidly changing. How do I stay on focus? Yeah, family focus, concern for staff being laid off. What a valid concern. Absolutely, Beth. Thanks for sharing that. Yes. Feeling things will never be the same. Thank you, Tracy, for sharing that. Every cloud is a silver lining and always to be optimistic. Thank you for saying that, Diane. Yeah, Chris, down economy. Absolutely. What can we learn from this? Yeah, Michelle, thanks. Yeah, how long for recovery? Yeah, great question. Great question. A time of a difference. Running out of toilet paper. That's a good one. A little bit of levity there. Thank you. Yeah. Well, thanks everybody. Continue to share. You know, during this webinar, just continue to talk and share with each other. Again, and one thing I wanted to let you know is when you share those things, what we have to be mindful of is we are not alone. None of us are alone. In times of crisis, oftentimes what happens is when we're under stress and our cortisol levels kick up, what happens is we start to look at the bottom barrel of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is we look at our basic needs and we want to make sure our basic needs are being taken care of. And we have a general fear that now those basic needs, that foundation is now in compromise. And those are valid fears. But I want to tell you, one of the things that happens when we start to become too inwardly focused on with fear is we feel isolated. And I wanted you to see that you are not alone, but your fears are valid. What we can't do is live outside of reality and say, let's close our eyes and pretend that this thing's just going to pass us by and no one is going to be affected by it. And the truth is, people will be affected by this virus. There is a scientist, a doctor named Michael Osterholm. I try not to look at the media, what the media is saying as much. I think we need to pay attention and we need credible sources, okay? But as leaders, it is important that we get out and we get as many credible sources about this virus as possible. So I try to look at people like Dr. Michael Osterholm, who is a disease expert, and he has studied the coronavirus in detail. And what he is saying is during this incubation period, this virus will continue to double on itself every 4 days. Please hear me out. I am not saying any of that to scare you. I am not saying that to send any of you in a panic. What I want to do as leaders is I want to live in reality. That scientifically that is going to happen. We can close our eyes, we can cross our fingers, we can truly hope for the best. But what we have to do is live in reality. We have to say that the chances of that happening are very good scientifically, that it's going to continue to double. Can we mitigate it by quarantining? Absolutely. Nonetheless, the world is going to continue to tick. The world is going to continue to move forward. So we have to be prepared for any and everything that will come our way concerning this virus. So here's what I want to cover today in the webinar. The first thing I want to cover is self-awareness. This is the start of great leadership. Most people are not self-aware. They don't have a great self-awareness. They don't know what they're thinking, why they're thinking, how they're thinking. They don't know their own emotions. They don't validate their own emotions, which we'll talk more about. Self-awareness is a foundation stone, especially during crisis. What happens to many leaders in crisis is they forget about themselves, they forget about their own feelings, or they shame themselves for feeling fear, for feeling doubt, for feeling worry. And what happens in situations where you don't validate your own feelings, your thoughts, or you don't pay attention to them, is these buried emotions that you have will come to the surface in other areas. And your cortisol levels, your stress levels will increase And you will not think as clear if you do not take time to listen to yourself during times of crisis. And if you don't listen to yourself, the chances of you being able to properly listen to others and how they're feeling and some of the challenges they're going through decreases exponentially. So we will talk about self-awareness. The next thing I would like to cover is I would like to cover the 3 V's of leadership. These are essential in affluent times and in times of peace, but these 3 V's are going to be essential for you working through this crisis that we're in. So I would ask you to pay attention to these, and again, to listen to the recording and to hopefully share this recording with your team so that you all can work through this crisis. And I do not want any of us to just make it through this crisis. I want us to flourish and set ourselves up for great success after this crisis. So these 3 V's will help us do that. Then I want to talk about staying connected and how important that is. How important that is to the lifeblood of our culture. How important that is to the lifeblood of our society moving forward. Staying connected is essential for us. And then we'll do some Q&A. We'll do some Q&A at the end, and I know this. I'm going to learn just as much from you as you're going to learn from this session here today. Okay, so let's talk first of all of self-awareness. In the chat section, you talked about some of the feelings that you're having of, the fear, the doubt, the worry, how the crisis immediately creates a bit of panic in your heart and your mind. What I want to do is also take the juxtaposition from this, okay? I want to take the juxtaposition. I want to say, okay, we've looked at the fact, and all your fears are valid, by the way, they really are. But let's take the opposite approach. Let's also be aware of the opportunities that you have. So if you would, write out some of the opportunities that this crisis is affording you right now. Write as many things as you can think of in the chat section, and we'll talk through some of those. Because part of self-awareness, it's turning up the volume on what your fears, doubts, and worries are, but it's also turning up the volume on your creative sensors and being able to tap in to the fact that when we are in crisis, we can have more alignment than ever because your body gets acutely focused during times of crisis. Everything in your body and your central nervous system says crisis, fight or flight, and you can direct yourself in a positive way to fight through this crisis and become aligned and have very positive outcomes. So we have to be able to focus on what those positive outcomes are, and then we'll talk through the 3 V's and talk about how you can do that practically during this time. So let's look at some of the things that people are saying. So coming through stronger, absolutely. Planning for the future, helping people, coming together, getting better relationships with family and neighbors, absolutely, Julie. Clarity on what's really important. That's really, really important to be able to focus on that. Being with loved ones. Reassess where we are. Ron, that's good. That's really good to reassess where we're at. It's really, really an important thing to do during this time. Making a greater impact. I have stressed that this is not a financial recession. It's a medical hiatus. It should offer huge opportunities in the future. Good, good. Opportunity to connect with others with whom we've grown distant. Absolutely, Matthew. That's great. The ability to help clients coping with the crisis. That is so important. And part of self-awareness and being able to validate ourselves is so that we can help others. There's a thing in psychology called the mirroring principle. And when we ourselves are in a healthy place, we attract, as a mirror would, to other people, the feelings of calmness, of serenity, of empathy that we should have during this time. Develop a strategy for all possible scenarios. Absolutely. Mayor Rudy Giuliani of New York City once said that when you prepare for everything, when the unexpected comes, you'll be ready. Self-reflection. Yes, Chris. Self-reflection, personal development, gaining experience in crisis, practicing compassion. Absolutely. All good things. Very good things. All right, so here's what I want to suggest. Okay, this is a little bit counterintuitive, but I want to give everybody some very practical things for self-awareness. One of the things we have to create is an integration in our heart, our mind, and our essence. So in our body, excuse me. When we are in a state of fear, doubt, and worry, what is happening is you have this almond-shaped synapse in the middle of your brain called the amygdala. And when you have those sensations going through your body of fight or flight, that is the amygdala firing sensor saying, things aren't right, things aren't right, things aren't right. Protect yourself, protect yourself, protect yourself. As if a dog is chasing you and it's rabid and it's gaining on you, your body kicks in those sensations of fight or flight, and you hopefully run and you get away, as you should. And those are good, okay? But when used too often, it is very unhealthy. Now, one of the ways that you work through that fear, doubt, and worry is, first of all, you recognize it, okay? You've got to recognize it, recognize the issues, and I suggest to all of you during this time, carry a journal with you everywhere. Carry a journal. Write down what you're feeling. Write down the fears, doubts, and worries that you're feeling. Sometimes it happens in a flash, in a moment. You're thinking, hey, everything's okay. And then all of a sudden, you realize that, oh, at the end of the month, the end of March here, we're getting ready to send billables. Oh my gosh, all my invoices are way down. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? How are we going to survive? What's going to happen? Oh my gosh, I've got clients shutting down left and right. What does that mean for April? Are we going to get any orders in? Are we going to have any clients or patients coming in these doors? How will we survive? Am I going to have to take a pay cut as an owner, as a leader? Am I going to have to reduce my salary in order to survive this? What does that mean? Most important thing is that you write that down and you say, here's what's actually going on inside of my mind and my heart. Next thing you've got to do, we'll talk about this a little bit later from a leadership perspective, you've got to validate it. When you validate the way that you feel, you create integration. But what a lot of people do, a lot of leaders, in fact, was coaching someone earlier who was doing this in the conversation, I had to challenge it, was, well, it's stupid that I feel the way I feel when other people are going through things 10 times worse than I am. I should suck it up. What am I doing? Why am I in this state of fear, doubt, and worry? When I got so many other people, I got 100 people on my staff, I should be worried about them. The fact is, if you do not validate yourself, you will have a difficult time sustaining validation towards others. So create a safe place for you to be able to express your own fears, doubts, and worries so that you can do it for others. Now, the next discipline is very counterintuitive, but scientifically, you cannot be in a state of fear, doubt, and worry, meaning the amygdala literally cannot fire when you are in a state of appreciation. Counterintuitive to a crisis is saying, you know what, let me think of all the things I am grateful for right now. Many of you have shared those already. I would suggest writing as many down as possible. I'm grateful that I still have my health right now. I'm grateful that we still have opportunity. I'm grateful that we live in a country that values human life above all, that we would quarantine and separate ourselves so that we protect the most valuable asset in the world, which is human life. I am grateful for that. What happens when you get into a state of appreciation is you literally shut off fear, doubt, and worry from being able to access you. Okay? So it's important that you discipline yourself enough. You're not mitigating reality. You're still aware of reality, but you're saying, you know what? I choose to look at opportunity. I choose to look at the positive side of life. The negatives are there, absolutely, but I choose to move forward in a positive direction. And that way, in that state, you are going to be very useful in helping your team. So those are disciplines that are difficult. My suggestion is when you wake up in the morning, very first thing, when you wake up in the morning, think of things you're grateful for. Say them out loud. Write them down. If you have a chalkboard wall at home, or if you have a whiteboard at home, write them down so you can see them all day. Memorize positive sayings. Those things will help keep you in a state of appreciation so that you are great use to other people during this crisis. And that's what we are as leaders. This idea that we should discuss servant leadership needs to be done. Servant leadership is leadership. Our job is to put our teams in the best position to succeed. That is our job as leaders. We have roles and responsibilities to be able to empathize, to listen, to care for, to direct, to protect, to show people a better way forward. That is so important for us to be able to do in this time of crisis. And we've got to stop this idea that servant leadership is a choice. Servant leadership is essentially leadership, okay? Because there is no other way. I don't think servant leadership as a theory for running an organization is proper, but the heart of a leader should be to put their team members in the best position to succeed, bar none, exclamation point. So I think we can all agree to that. Somebody raised their hand here. I want to make sure that I pay attention to that. David J. Hey, Dave. I'm going to unmute you, Dave. Go ahead and share your thoughts. And anybody who has wants to share something, go ahead and raise your hand. But go ahead, Dave. Share. Good to see you, buddy. David, you there? I unmuted you. All right, we'll come back to you, buddy. You can type your comments too if you want, but we'll come back around. Okay, so self-awareness, very important. Do not mitigate your own fears, doubts, and worries, because if you do that to yourself, the chances of you doing that to others is very high. Okay, next, let's talk about this. And I want to talk about this very practically, is vision. We're going into the 3 V's now. First one is V for vision. Vision is being able to see a preferred future. Now, what is uncertain right now? It's time. Time is uncertain. We don't know how long this is going to last. None of us do. Nobody knows how long this is going to last. We can prognosticate. I know President Trump said he wants by Easter for all the quarantines to end and this to be mitigated. We cannot say whether or not that will happen. But what we can do as leaders, because in states of uncertainty, there is a heightened sense of fear, because 97% of people already do not have a vision for their life. So what do they expect? They expect leaders to have a vision for them. But what happens in states of crisis and uncertainty is leaders lose a vision. Why? Because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen. So it's important that you, for the foreseeable future, get very, very clear about your vision for this time. Now, what I would ask you to do, I want you to write this down if you get a chance. Dream small. Dream small right now. And that is this. Dream for a week at a time, but be abundantly clear with your team. Communicate your vision and do it at painstaking detail. So what could be some vision that you have for your team? You can write down some comments as we go forward, but I got a couple of ideas for you. A couple of ideas are this. How do you, a vision could be, let's create a sense of normalcy and daily discipline. So there's some people who are working remotely right now. In fact, a lot of people are. How do we, while staying on a critical path of client work, patient work, customer work, get the most out of our time? We've got to be disciplined at home. So one thing we can do with our teams is say, hey, the first thing we want to do is we want to create a working structure for you while you are quarantined. while we are in this shutdown state. We want to make sure that you have a sense of normalcy. So one thing that I suggest, I used to work from home. When I started my first business, I worked from home for 4 years, okay? Kids in the background, crazy stuff going on. It's very easy to keep your PJs on until 10 a.m. and not feel like you're getting anything accomplished. To have a vision to set structure for people and disciplines for them like this. They still wake up in the morning the same time they did. If they exercised at the gym at 5 a.m., have them exercise maybe in their neighborhood. Take time to work with individuals to get discipline set up. Have them get dressed for their day, just like they would if they're going to the office. The same things that they would do, try to create as much normalcy as possible. Have them set aside a room in their house where they're going to work every day. So it creates, again, daily wins for them, so that they don't feel out of sorts. Include people in this vision as well. Say, what are your thoughts? How can we get the most done during this time? Another thing I will ask everyone to do is, there is a leadership expert, change expert. His name is Kurt Lewin. He has what's called the Lewin change model. Okay, it's a 3-step model. Says you usually freeze an organization. So what happens in crisis, things get unfrozen. Okay, that means everyone's like, oh my gosh, what is happening right now? Things are crazy. We have an opportunity to make changes now. So what I would ask all of you to do is take some time to evaluate what is really, really good and what is not so good in your organization. Evaluate what you really love about your organization and look at what you don't really love and look for opportunities to change that. That is another vision that you can have during this time, and make sure that you put priority to it and you make the changes that you need to. Include your team in this, so that when you get back to some more normalcy, you are going to be able to make those changes and get ahead of the curve versus just trying to survive during this time. So those are a couple of ideas for vision. The next thing I want to talk about is this: vulnerability. Vulnerability. Oftentimes in the great man theory of leadership, which is not a good theory of leadership, it is essentially the opposite of servant leadership, is that we shouldn't show weakness as leaders, that we should only show strength and prostrate strength in times of crisis. And what you do is you create this almost demigod view of leadership, where the leader is so far beyond and above and untouchable that people cannot relate. And what we want as leaders is people to be able to relate to us. The roles and responsibilities remain the same, but what I ask is, as leaders, to be vulnerable with your team in communication. Now, we do have valid fears, doubts, and worries. One of the things that I'm hearing over and over again from clients during this time is, I'm afraid that I have to lay people off because we're not going to get as much work done with people being at home. What I suggest to every client and to you today is for you to communicate that to your team in a very respectful and kind way. So here's what I mean by that. Do not do this, by the way, off of a blast email. You're not going to get a good response. Please be careful of the blast emails you're sending out. Remember that 55% of communication is body language, 38% is tone of voice, only 7% is the words. The words are very important, don't get me wrong, but the way people interpret that, especially in times of fear, is usually negative. So be careful of blast emails and blast broadcast. What I would explain to people during this time is this. I would tell them, hey, listen, we have this vision. We need to make sure that we're keeping client and patient work as high as we possibly can, because we do not want to lay anybody else off. We don't want to lay anyone off during this time. We'd like to keep everybody working. We want to keep everybody getting paid. Would you please give me some ideas on how we can keep client work, patient work very high during this time and while you're working at home? Because it is a genuine fear of mine that we're not going to get as much done. What the research shows is when leaders give people trust, especially in times of crisis, and especially when it comes to morality, which is if you're getting paid for certain amounts of hours, that you get set amount of hours of work done. When people are trusted, they tend to make really, really good decisions. But I have heard a lot of leaders making false assumptions or judgmental assumptions about people during this time. What they say is, well, people aren't going to work hard from home. They're not going to put in the hours that they need to put into. And what I say is, let's take a different approach. Let's assume the best, and let's also be vulnerable to say, hey, listen, because of the uncertainty and because we don't know what the market is going to do, our fear is that we'll have to lay people off. Why not be completely honest with people about the prospect that we could have to lay people off? You got to be sensitive about this, but the point is that you include people with the solution to the problem. And what you'll find is when you include people and you say, as a leader, hey, I'm open to any and all suggestions so that we can move forward in a positive way together, people are going to give you great answers. It'll also kick up their resolve, because one thing that kicks up resolve is a sense of an ultimatum. When your back is against the wall, you tend to focus better. And that is something that I suggest to every one of my clients. Please be vulnerable. This is not weakness. This is your greatest measure of courage, is to be vulnerable. The last thing, and then I want to get to some of these comments here. Excuse me. The last thing is validation. Validation for the way people feel creates a greater sense of connection. When people are coming to you with their fears, with their doubts, with their worries, the worst thing a leader can do, and this is in any time, and I see it all the time, and I'm telling you, it's one of those things that I slap my head, because our greatest tool in leadership is our connection with our staff and our people, being connected. And how you do that is when someone comes to you with fear, doubt, and worry, you validate it. That doesn't mean you agree with it. That doesn't mean that you approve of it. What it means is you care about the connection with the individual. Remember this, nothing is more important than the value of human life in the world. I would rather my business ship go down sinking and me take care of my people and make sure that they're in a safe environment and they feel like I fought to the end with them, than I would about me making buku dollars and me stepping on people's heads on the way to the top. We have got to validate the fact that during this time, people are feeling an extreme amount of fear, doubt, and worry. So what that means is this: if you're healthy, you look at somebody who's in it, and it may be a panic state, it may be unjustifiable that they're feeling that way, but here's how you respond. Somebody comes to you with this heightened sense of fear, doubt, and worry, and you say, hey, based upon the circumstances, I can understand why you feel the way that you feel. During this time where we don't know what is going to happen, I understand the fear, doubt, and worry. But then after you validate, okay, and there's many other ways to validate. We could talk more about this, and you can send me an email and we can have an exchange about this. But after you do that, it is very important to go back to the first V. But let's focus on what we can control. Let's look at the vision. Let's focus on the fact that we right now have an opportunity to get better together, that we have an opportunity to increase discipline, that we have an opportunity to connect with one another at higher levels. So take that point where they're vulnerable with you, validate it, but then once you validate it, make sure you point back to the we, the us, and our vision moving forward. Validation, though, creates great connection. If you do not validate people, meaning the opposite of this, when somebody comes to you and you go, you know what, everybody's afraid right now, everybody's scared, everybody's got fear, doubt, worry, just suck it up because we all got to do this together. What you do right there is you crush somebody's vulnerability. It will take a long time for them to be vulnerable with you again. It's going to take a while, but you miss an opportunity to really help somebody contribute to the overall vision of the organization. Be very, very careful with when people come to you and they are vulnerable with you, not to crush them, but to validate them. And please be careful sending out blast emails and blast broadcasts where you say, you know what, we just got to suck it up and we got to be full steam ahead. You know, there are people who know people who have COVID. There are people who have contracted the coronavirus. It is very important that although 98.3% of people will recover from it, the fear is real and it is valid. So make sure you validate, but then redirect towards the vision. Last thing, and then we're going to open this up to discussion, is I want you to stay connected. Now, I already said that about blast broadcast. This is an opportunity right now. Most organizations have very poor communication systems, poor at best, okay? What I would ask for everybody is to now get your communication systems in place, okay? At the most, one leader should talk to 10 people. One leader should talk to 10 people. That is when people have more, or they have fewer leaders. Excuse me, this just went off on me. This is when people have 10 people that they're responsible for, but in most organizations, it's not like that. And especially in times of crisis, what they find is who's responsible for communicating what the hierarchy is not in the right order. And so what I ask is that during this time, you delegate somebody in your stead to communicate one-on-one or 5 or fewer people in regular communication. That means it should be one person to a 5-person group that is going to communicate daily the essentials, the critical path. So have people calling people one-on-one. And the first question you should ask when you are connecting with people during this time, remember, human life is the greatest value in the world. Whether our businesses go down or not, which will not happen. But what we must do is we must value human life above all. And on the back end of this, I promise you this, people will never forget that. And it will establish your culture, your organizational culture for years to come. If during this time you show them with the way that you act, that human life is the greatest value. So the first question you ask when you make the call is this: are you doing okay? First things first, before we get into business, how are you? How is your family? How are you feeling? Ask a couple of questions. I promise you this won't take long, but listen, validate, and then focus on vision. Okay, so the reason I called is we've got to get focused on this. Do you have any feedback? Is there any way we can? You must stay connected, and this is daily. We take this for granted, but when we are together in person, we get distracted daily. So the average individual in business loses 2.5 hours a day in productivity time because of distractions. And a lot of those distractions is just one person walking to another person's office going, hey, what's going on? That's valuable. I don't want to say that's not valuable, because you're connecting with one another. You're creating camaraderie, you're creating culture, you're answering each other's questions. You're maybe talking about a game. Maybe there's too much blather going on. But you lose that when you're at home. People can feel isolated. They can go into fear, doubt, and worry. So you now, leaders, must be proactive in connecting with your team. Call them daily. Have phone calls in the morning to connect and ask that question. Hey, how is everybody doing? How are you? How are you feeling? What's going on? How's your family? How's your work? How's your balance? Okay? So that's really, really important. Let's get to some of the chat, and then I've got this. I wrote this book a few years ago called Do It Anyways, Growing Through Adversity. It's very relevant for this time, and I wanted to give that to you today for joining me. Let's get to the chat. All right. So anybody's got a question or comment, go ahead and share that. I'd love to have some interaction and some feedback right now on some of the things that we shared. And please bring up whatever it is that you want to share, and you can say it privately, or if you want to raise your hand, I can get to you, and you can share with the group some of your thoughts, some of your feelings, some of your questions. David, I'm going to unmute you again. You raised your hand. I want to get your feedback. So you're on, buddy. Okay. So no, nothing from Dave. Anybody else? Go ahead and just share some of your questions or your thoughts. All right. Listen, validate, then redirect, Michael. Redirect. Really important to redirect. So Michael's asking, you know, we want to listen to people, we want to validate what they say, and then what? Then we want to redirect towards vision. Remember, a lack of vision is what causes the greatest amount of fear. Most people attach themselves to other people's vision, but it's common sense. If you have no vision, you're lost. And lost people, the common feelings of being lost: frustrated, angry, scared, and hostile. So we've got to create the vision for people of, okay, yes, that is very important. Let's move it forward. Dallas Richardson, what about people who are still coming to work, working through this crisis? How do you assist in validating them? Dallas, that's such a great question. And there are a lot of people who are, you know, braving the wilderness, you know, coming out and, you know, going to the office and working. It's the same thing. And really a lot of this stuff are things that we should be doing in general as leaders. But Dallas, what I'd suggest is same thing. You know, with the proper social distancing, you know, you're going to walk up to people and say, hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling during this time? Is there anything that you're seeing that we can improve here? Is there any way that we can, you know, take better care of clients? A lot of clients are going through some crisis right now. A lot of patients are going through crisis. Is there any way that you see we can help, you know, move them forward? Because what that's going to do, Dallas, it'll increase your level of camaraderie in your culture. Now, the research shows this, that in normal times, this is a good thing about crisis and culture, is in normal times, what most businesses do is they mitigate social norms and heighten their business norms. They push their business norms and they basically say all social norms don't apply here. But in times of crisis, we accept social norms more, which is, inside of a business is people, and people are business. So what causes people to work better together? Connectivity in relationships. So in crisis, what do? Because of the social crisis, we bring in social norms of connectivity more than we do in downtimes. So just like you do with a friend or a family member, you want to ask your teammates, hey, how you feeling during this time? And that's in person and outside. So a lot of the same things. And these are also things that we can do after the crisis and make sure that we create norms inside of our culture for paying attention to how people are feeling, how are they doing, both personally and professionally. Anything else? Yeah, Michael made a comment. He said, taking even better care of those employees at this time is vitally important. Provide extra perks, free lunches, allow them to leave early or start an hour later. And Julian, yeah, thanks for sharing that. She said, the worst thing we can say to somebody is you shouldn't feel that way. It's so true. Antonio, can you share any creative ways to build camaraderie while working remotely? I have a daily phone call with my team and I'm hosting happy hours. I am concerned that this isn't creating enough of a connection. First of all, I love the virtual happy hour, Antonio. That is awesome. I think that is something I suggest to everybody. Cut out at 4:30 one day, have everybody grab a drink, get on Zoom chat or on some sort of virtual webinar, and just get together and talk and have fun. Again, it creates more camaraderie and a feeling of stability, and it's a good vision for people to have. Tony, the biggest thing I will tell you is being consistent in your connectivity. Trisha said, by the way, what time is this virtual happy hour? I'll be your employee for a day. That's great. So another thing, Tony, is just being consistent. It's consistency over time, and that's not the sexy thing anybody wants to hear. You know, we want this one, you know, snap answer that's going to be great. But it's really, Tony, you're doing the right things. As you do the same things over and over again. You continue to ask how people are feeling. You continue to validate how they feel. You continue to share vision. By the way, share vision daily. Do not shortchange people by not continuing to share vision, because they need to hear it now more than ever. Is vision and a sense of normalcy and a sense of purpose and a sense of growth during this time, because again, being lost makes you feel fearful, doubt, and worry. Mike, you're having one today at 4:30. That's great. Hey, Tracy. Do you recommend setting up a daily Zoom meeting to keep in touch? Tracy, yes, I do. I do. Again, this is not the same as presence. Don't get me wrong, because there is a chemical exchange when you're in person with somebody that, you know, obviously you're not seeing, but you feel differently. You get people's vibrations. You get a sense of how people are feeling when you're in person. But this is the next best thing. I would rather see people's faces. I would rather see their gestures than just a phone call. So yes, Tracy, I highly recommend setting up a daily Zoom meeting. Another thing I wanted to say, I've heard this from a lot of clients during this time, is they're not as busy as they thought they were. That is because of some of the distractions that we get during the day-to-day. It is on average that 2.5 hours of productivity time is spent in distractions. So a lot of the time, and here's what happens. It takes you about 20 minutes to get completely focused on a specific task psychologically. So we all know this, you know, when you're working on a project, you're working on an email, you find yourself trying to get really focused in, and, you know, you're dealing with all these other distractions. You finally go, okay, I'm going to get it together. It's like in college or in high school when you had to write that paper and you finally get to the point of no return. It's like, I got to get this done now. And now you sit down and you type and you write and you get it done. Okay. It takes us but what happens when you're at home is you have a heightened acuity because you don't have the distractions. So having said that, I would take time to schedule something every single day to allow for just this open dialogue. If you think you've gotten 2.5 hours back, take a half hour every day and just get everyone together and talk. Again, groups of five. You should have a good enough hierarchy in your organization to have groups of 5. If you don't, it's a really good time to look at your communication hierarchy in your organization. Now, I know some of you out there who have bought into the servant leadership theory as a theory for running your organization. That is not good, okay? What you want is strict hierarchy, so everyone knows their roles and responsibilities, and who's responsible for making sure that the proper information gets passed on, and people know who they are to answer to and to talk to when it comes to the dissemination of information. So make sure that this time you take time to get your communication hierarchy down. Pam Davies said, we developed remote work plans for staff and meet once a week on Google Meet. That's great, Pam. I really like the remote work plan. You know what? Pam, I'm going to unmute you first, and Nikki. Pam, I'm going to unmute you here for a second. I would like you to explain that remote work plan and see if that's something that will help some of the other members on here. And Nikki said 2 things. The worst thing to do is not, oh, I'm sorry, it's getting messed up right now. Technical. Worst thing to do is not reaching out to employees. Being sent and be sensitive to those who are working in the office is crucial. Absolutely, Nikki. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah. So, Pam, would you mind sharing that? What you're doing for the remote work plans? That might be something that other people could benefit from. I just unmuted you. Pam? Pam Davies? Okay.
You hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yep.
I was looking for the right button.
Oh, no worries.
We developed a plan before we went to remote, individually for each staff person or each department. And the things that they're supposed to do while we're shut down, like daily checking emails, because we communicate a lot that way. Setting up our weekly meetings. We are communicating back and forth through email. We have a phone call list of consumers for them to call and check up on. Plus the staff interacts with phones. But the remote work plan is just simply what we expect them to be doing while we're working remotely. Things like checking email, calling consumers, getting a list of resources locally for the consumers that we all share, either through OneDrive or through emails. I'm trying to think of what else is on there. Finding new resources in each of our counties that we could possibly work with after this is over that we haven't been working with, along with the resource list.
That's great.
Things like that.
That's great. And I recommend that for everybody. Have that working plan that people can look at. Again, that's partly vision, is having something written out to where people can see it. So that is a great idea. Thank you so much for sharing that, Pam. I appreciate that. The last thing I want to do before we get off here is I've got this book I wrote a couple years ago. I wanted to give it to you. All you have to do is you have to text the word "do it" to this number that's on the screen. You text that, you put your email in, it'll send you an email copy of the book. Okay, it's an electronic copy. And don't worry, we're not going to use your number and sell it, whatever else. Okay, it really is just a very easy, simplistic way for us to get information to you. So please download this book, and I talk about the scientific information of what fear does and what adversity does to our brains and how it affects our bodies, and then what you can do to counteract that. And it's going to be a great resource for you and your team as well. The last thing I want to tell you is during this time, we wanted to offer a discovery session, just one session, and it's a 25% off during this time. It's really important that you get support and you get help in coaching. We are coaches. That is what we do. We want to be here in support. So if you want to take us up on a discovery session during this time, just one session commitment, and we will make sure that we help you plan out your crisis period, and we want to be a support to you. So please reach out to me or Lean at mross@hbkln.com and Julene at jkiefer@hbkln.com. So thank you all so much for this time. Here's what we covered today. We covered self-awareness, how important that is, the 3 V's of leadership, staying connected, and we did some Q&A. Remember, last thing, but not least, you are not alone. We are here for you. You've got team members who are here for you. So in all the fear and the doubt and worry that's swirling around, never forget you are not alone. And as long as we lock arms and we stay together, we're going to get through this and we're going to fight through it. So you can leave your last comments here in the last minute, and I'm going to unmute and you all can say whatever you want to say on here. And it's been such a pleasure and an honor meeting with you.
Hey, Mike.
Hey.
Hello.
Hey.
Hello, you too. Oh, hey, I got a question for you. Anybody hear anything about federal funding that might be coming about to sustain, keeping employees paid fully?
Say that again.
Any federal funding that would be available, not so much as a small business loan, but to maintain employee salaries?
Yeah, that's a great question. Shoot me an email. I got, maybe we can get on a quick phone call. I'd love to talk to you about that in a little more detail. If I could ask you a few more questions, I think we can get down to the bottom of
I
some.
can't say anything because you screwed up my chat.
It's mross@hbkln.com. I'll give you a phone call once we end this.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, y'all. Hey, I appreciate everybody. I'm going to end this and we'll send out the recording to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Hope to do it again soon.
How do I get Joanne off? Jerry. You're an asshole.
Well, I didn't know why it was echoed. I didn't even know.